Of Coffee with Karl and Rob. I'm Rob Hipp, Director of Operations at SHN Sports, as always joined by my best friend and also business partner, Karl Schoening, Director of Broadcasting here at SHN. Karl, happy day to you. I know you've already got your coffee. How you doing, man?
I am definitely on cup number 2, but it's good. I enjoy it. I'll also get my phone off here. So, whoops. Well, we already have our first turnover of the game, Rob. So luckily that was on me and not any of the equipment. But I need a little more of this coffee. I'll tell you that much. Good morning.
Yeah, good to see you. Today's all about elevating your broadcast, and the number 0. We have 10 that we're going to go through today, but number 0 is don't pour coffee on your equipment. That is the number 1 method to elevate your broadcast.
Yeah, that's one way to make sure your broadcast is not ruined. Any kind of liquids, honestly, I'm playing with fire, keeping it right here. Really, I'm playing with coffee, but better on me. This is a live show, so it's better on me than on anything that could get sensitively equipment. I can wash this shirt later.
Yeah, well, today, again, we're going to talk 10 quick points on how to elevate your broadcast, whether you're in sports broadcasting. It's a heavy focus on sports broadcasting, but live streaming, I think all of this can kind of fit into one play. We bring you this every single week, so make sure that you chime in if you have any comments or any questions about how can you elevate your broadcast. Let us know. Give us your feedback as we are here live on YouTube on the SHN channel. And also, before we get started, I want to encourage you that we'll go in depth. You can learn more in sports broadcasting by joining the SHN Sports Association. All you have to do is go to members.shnsports.com, where we'll provide in-depth insight into the broadcasting industry, not just how to do play-by-play and be an analyst, but we'll also go over live streaming techniques and much more. Karl, let's dig right into it, man. Are you ready?
Oh, let's do it. I love talk broadcasting.
Well, here we go. 10 steps today on how to elevate your broadcast. I wanted to start with the first one here. And the first one to elevate your broadcast is knowing your audience. Understand who you're catering to and tailor your content accordingly. Friends, a broadcast is aimed at diehard fans. It may require more in-depth analysis than one aimed at casual viewers. And that's something that's important, Karl. Whenever you're broadcasting, you really need to know your audience. You're not going to broadcast a high school or a college game the same way that you would a Little League game.
That's very true. And, I think that that's something that a lot of people need to understand when they start off in broadcasting is, you're not going to really want to, as much as you want to, I should say, you're not going to start wanting to talk about the Cowboys during your high school football game because that's not really relevant to this scenario because you want to actually talk about your high school, the teams that your high school is going to be playing. Maybe throw in a couple references to the Cowboys if you're a Cowboys fan, or the NFL if you're an NFL fan. But really, when it comes down to it, you are there to do the high school game. As much as you might want to, just one day aspire, be in the NFL or college level, you have to understand that not everybody in your audience cares about the NFL and college level. They care about those people on the field right now. So you must then cater your broadcast to them. So make sure that you are staying as focused and in the moment as you can on the broadcast that you're doing. And that's sort of where you're talking about your audience because, again, it's one of those things where you probably can assume if you're doing, let's say, I'm just going to throw out something I've done, a USL championship game, for example, for soccer. That's like sort of the second division right underneath the MLS and American professional soccer. You're not going to be able to or want to make references to the English Premier League, for example. You want to keep it very focused on USL Championship and the guys playing out there on that pitch. Same with any other level. Don't start straying away unless it has a relevant point back to the topic.
Yeah, 100%. Good stuff this morning on 10 ways to elevate your broadcast. So that first one, know your audience. I think the second one, too, as we continue on, we've got 10 of them for you. Number 2 is just make sure that you have a lot of research and preparation. Thoroughly study the teams you're broadcasting for, the players, recent events to provide accurate and insightful commentary. I think being well prepared demonstrates professionalism, and it really does boost credibility. There's been a lot of games that I've been a part of to where I honestly didn't prepare well. And when you get on the air, it's like, man, I really wish that I would have dug more in depth on this. So one of the most embarrassing ones is I called a game many, many years ago at the high school level where there was 2 brothers, one on each side of the team. And as I was calling the game, dumb me, I said, oh, they must be brothers. Number one, don't ever say that. You should know that whenever you go into the broadcast. So make sure that you do your research and do prep work.
Yeah, and when it comes to family relations, you might not have time or accessibility to confirm that. That's just something that's going to happen. But when you're talking about broadcasting, yes, get as much information as you can. At the professional and college levels, it's much more accessible information. They usually have websites that are kept up to date. Sometimes there's something called sports information directors at colleges or public relations directors for professional teams that will basically give you all of the information you need for your broadcast. High school and other various sports that are sub-college, Division I and professional, maybe getting a little bit tougher finding that information, because really it comes down to, like you said, Rob, are you prepared for the broadcast? And at least at the very, very bare minimum, have a roster and know how to say the names. And preferably, if you can, start to get a little more information as who's actually going to play on this roster, what they're good at, things like that. And sometimes in high school, and you know this, Rob, you've done high school football just as long as me, you get coaches that don't want to really give you anything. You send an email on Monday. You send a follow-up on Wednesday. They get back to you on Friday, game day 2 hours before, and it's like, hey, here you go. This is our roster. And then you got to figure out among 100 kids, okay, there's which one's the quarterback, And so it's possible to go into a broadcast unprepared, and it's not your fault is what I'm getting at. But make every effort to be prepared, because unless you're just superhuman at it, showing up and getting the roster right as you're about to go live is pretty much setting yourself up to fail. So then other stuff is we have some SHN tools that are great. You are. It's phenomenal what you built for NCAA basketball broadcasters, where we need to tweak some of the details, but the beta version of your roster creation really just saved me so much time and prep work this year, where I was doing some UTSA games. I know you used it for all of your North Dakota State stuff, where it's just like, okay, UTSA is playing Middle Tennessee State in women's basketball, and I had the rosters and up-to-date stats right there available because of an SHN Sports Association members tool that really, we need to do a better job of marketing to all of the NCAA basketball broadcasters out there, because that'll save them hours of prep work. And prep work is key. You want to know, hey, this is their leading scorer. This is how much they're averaging. So at least look through it somewhere and have it ready to go so you can not speak off the top of your head. Prep work key. Knowing where that prep work is, even more important. But, doing as much as you can. Reading game stories from the games before is a good thing you can do if you're at the higher levels where game stories are written. And, seeing what these teams have done previously and what they have coming up next in their schedule. There's so much that goes into prep work. Even researching the coach's background. It's like, oh, hey, he started at Georgetown High School, but, before that he was at McNeil, and then he was a graduate assistant at Texas State. Things like that are probably, you're really getting into the details there if you're coming prepared with that kind of stuff. But, again, just most important thing, the players on the field. If you have those informations down, that's where you start, and then you can get into those extra little nuggets as you can find them.
The 2 Ps, players on the field and pronunciations. And one other little tidbit to add to that, Karl, is at the high school level, as you mentioned, it's hard to get some of that information. Start engaging with the parents. I've actually been able to obtain a lot of information just talking to parents at games, and also go back. If you can find archived games from that season, if they've already happened, maybe an opponent has played another team, use the internet. It's your friend, but make sure that you are prepared going into the game. Don't have excuses, just have results. And like Karl said, sometimes there are some things that you can't prepare for, but make every effort to. We're talking about elevating your broadcast here this morning on on Coffee with Karl and Rob. 10 ways to elevate your broadcast. We've already been through 2, is know your audience, research, and prep. And here's the third one. It's developing a unique style. I think cultivating a distinct voice and personality really makes your broadcast stand out. You can experiment with different approaches to find the one that best resonates with your audience. Down here in the South, Oh Mama was one of my calls. They loved it. I don't think in Fargo it caught on too much, but you know what? That's my unique style. I'm not ripping one from Bill Land because he says it as well, but I realized very quickly that I was like, oh, Bill says that also. But that's okay. You've just got to develop your own unique style. Don't try to copy other people, Karl.
Yeah, and I'm not saying you're necessarily trying to copy Bill Land with that. It's just sort of he's one of the guys that you're a Spurs fan, so you've listened to Spurs games, and Bill Land is Spurs television. So, Oh Mama isn't necessarily something that Bill Land probably came up with, but he was sort of trademarked for being the person who says it in the NBA at least. But then, that's how you develop your individual style, by listening to guys that you like and you want to pull things from. The one place where you can go wrong is almost directly trying to copy somebody. Like a Gus Johnson, for example. There's only one Gus Johnson. And if you don't know who Gus Johnson is, I would say if you're trying to impersonate him, you're probably going to go over the top. He's a very runs high energy, gets way into the mic, higher levels of volume, and he's like, oh, all the time, and that's something that Gus Johnson perfected, and I'm not going to say he did first, but he certainly is most famous for doing, and it's not something that you can necessarily pull off unless you develop your own style to it. Sure, pull things from the guys that you like, but really, the more you do the broadcasting, I'm talking over the course of hundreds of broadcasts, I would go ahead and say that is probably something that will come more naturally than you think. But it's not a bad thing to start by saying, you know what, I like Bill Land saying that, so I'm going to go ahead and try using that. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but listening to other guys is certainly key. But then listen to yourself and go back and, start to critique it a little bit. And, I think one of the things that you and I have that may or may not be great for national broadcasts is while you can't hear it in our voice all that much, we're still Texan. So we're still going to do Texan things in our pronunciations. We're going to say y'all. We're going to do all those fun things that sort of you might not find for somebody that's from Fargo or from Seattle. So, those are kind of the little things that make the overall style a little bit different, the fact that you've listened to mostly Texas broadcasters and such. But, I will say that the more you do broadcasting, the more you'll find your own voice. So if you are finding yourself thinking that you're trying to sound like a Kevin Harlan, for example, that's not a bad starting point. Kevin Harlan's great. You're not going to go right to TNT without having done thousands of games. So by the time you do get to the Kevin Harlan point, if you're ever lucky enough to get there, you're not sounding exactly like Kevin Harlan. But hey, you never know. Maybe starting off with that sort of, I want to sound like Kevin Harlan, works its way into you getting his job. So, that developing your own voice, it's all accumulation of how do you sound like. I was very fortunate. Obviously, my father is a play-by-play broadcaster for the Spurs and the Longhorns before that, so I grew up listening to Craig Way and Bill Schoening, and I feel like I sort of have a combination of the two as the majority of my own individual style. So, I'll take that kind of combination, but I obviously build in my own stuff based off of what other people aren't doing. So, you have to kind of figure it out on your own, what makes you stand out.
That's right. There's a couple, as you mentioned, and of course, I grew up listening to Bill and Craig as well, but more so Kevin Harlan and Marv Albert. So on my broadcast, every once in a while, you'll hear the tone start to go like this. Here we go. It's 3rd down and 10. And then all of a sudden in basketball, it's yash, right between the eyes. Just kidding. I don't copy it that much.
And, I bet you if you ask Kevin Harlan, who's somebody we should probably just get on the show at some point, maybe when we've developed a few more followers and done a few episodes, obviously, he would probably tell you he was inspired by Marv Albert. So his yes is probably not too far off from the Marv Albert yes, and then you start to play them back to back, and it's like they are the same kind of guy in a way, but, Kevin does his own thing, and Kevin's great too. So, it's never bad to just go ahead and listen to everybody else and then pick what you like from that. We'll probably circle back to that again, but the first time we're saying that when you're developing your own style, you're not the first person to do play-by-play, so you don't have to start from scratch.
And one of the one other thing to add on is our good friends from Malakoff, Texas. Nobody is more unique than Joey Townsend and Marcus and Aaron and those guys. If you ever get a chance on SHN on the YouTube channel, search for Malakoff Tigers, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. Their personality and their style fits that community beautifully. That's what we're talking about.
All I'll say is do that and hashtag oh my.
Yeah, that's right. And you'll find out why when you go watch one of them. We're talking today about how to elevate your broadcast. Rob Hipp alongside Carl Schoening. The fourth one, it's really important, especially with baseball, is master the art of storytelling. Engage your audience by weaving compelling narratives around the events you're covering. You can highlight intriguing stories about the athletes, the teams, and historical moments. That will really keep listeners and viewers hooked. And I alluded to it, baseball is one of those sports where you have a lot of time to tell a lot of stories, Carl.
Yeah, and the game itself is a story, right? So I think one of the things that you need to do is start documenting the broadcast that you're working, and not necessarily keep track of score, but in baseball I do. I write out the lineup, and first inning, this is what happens. Second inning, this is what happens. So this way, when I get to the middle of the game, I can just sort of recap what happened. It's like, oh hey, just using UTSA names, Serdashny scored on the Leighton Berry double, and then then Leighton Berry was brought in by the Antonio Valdez single, and that's why the Roadrunners are up 2-0 thanks to that 2-run bottom of the fourth inning. Before that, it was a 1-2-3 inning for the opposing starter in the second and the third. He had a little scare in the first. You're telling the story as it's happening for this particular story, but then you want to be able to, in a non-boring way, articulate what happened in previous games and, what happened with the players or the coaches. And, in baseball, sometimes you just tell stories to tell stories because the pace is that slow. Like, I think I was talking about how Ty Cobb, in baseball, you're allowed to slide into second to try and break up a double play. Well, Ty Cobb really wanted to break up the double play, so I called him a jerk on air because he would spike his cleats. So, yeah, he would sharpen the spikes on his cleats to try and break up double plays and injure somebody who would, be
Yikes.
willing to take the slide to the shins. It's like, man, so, you just have little things like that. Vin Scully was the master. I guarantee you, if you just go on YouTube and look up Vin Scully highlights, if you're trying to do baseball, he was the best baseball play-by-play broadcaster of all time. So he would tell you exactly how to weave stories in. But you're right, it's so many narratives, create storylines. That goes back to the prep work. Be prepared to say, oh, this happened, that happened. UTSA looking to have a bounce-back year because they were snubbed from the NCAA tournament last year when they weren't selected at large, even though they, fit in the RPI and stuff like that. So, there's things that you should probably always have ready to go. And then the one thing I will say, if you're covering a team all season, it can get old, too, if you just constantly repeat the same storyline. So try and work in new ones or, just stop saying some old ones. So
That's right.
Those are just sort of things that I feel like sometimes we could probably do a little bit better job as broadcasters that deal with teams day in and day out. It's like I've probably said that this has happened so many times that it's lost its value to the people that watch every day with me.
Yeah, and there's always stories, especially with the visiting team, so you can always have an opportunity to tell stories. One of my favorite is to tell stories about the venues as well, the history. Bluebell Park at Texas A&M, it's always neat to talk about that, and then you can tie in where did the name come from and those things. I was broadcasting an alumni football game out all the way in East Texas one time. This was outside of I'm trying to think. This was outside of Beaumont area years ago, and some of my favorite is not even doing, of course, Division I or high school, but doing alumni football games. There was literally a house with a horse right on the opposite end of the end zone, and it showed up in our camera view. And I told the story about that house and that horse, and you know what? It engaged with people. It got Carl laughing here, and I guarantee it got people laughing on the broadcast.
Those Gridiron Glory games, man, that was the beginning of SHN sports. Man, you and I had some adventures. I went to like Stamford, Texas, the first and only time I'll probably ever go to Stamford, Texas, just south of the Oklahoma border. We did a tornillo. Is that the name of the town?
Tornillo, yeah,
versus
tornillo.
New Mexico, man. Those are fun, and in situations like that, if you can just kind of work it in, where it's like, get to know the players. It's fun, but you got to make it fun. I think something that we don't have on this list that we maybe should have had is enjoy where you are. Because that's sort of the main thing. I think sometimes people get in this industry to go further, and I think that's what holds some of these people back that really want to get to the next level, is that you can still hear it in their voice that they're not necessarily enjoying where they are. And I think that's something that no matter how good you are, you can't really fool the fans. Even if they kind of think you do a good job, there's always that little subconscious thing where, if you're thinking in the back of your head, I'd rather be doing Major League Baseball than college baseball, then people hear that. That's sort of, if you're not having fun with it, if you're not enjoying it, if you're just sort of doing this small town team to do the big town team, then, that's maybe detrimental to your broadcast. So, yeah, I kind of forget where we are in what's our tip that we're currently on, because I derailed, but let me
master the art of storytelling. But you're telling a story, so there you go.
Yeah, there you go. So it's just sort of weave in narratives and stuff, but also just one last thing is keep it happy where you are, because I think when you're telling a story, just out of telling a story, it's not as interesting. So that's a part of being a narrative. There is just to sort of have your information ready to go and tell it in a compelling way, and that's not easy. So once again, another skill to develop.
Yeah, and in a future episode, I'll talk about, my journey. A lot of folks have asked me, and I don't want to derail on this too long because I will do it in another episode, but people have asked me, Rob, why'd you leave Fargo? You had one of the most lucrative Division I jobs in the country, and I'll explain that sometime, because there's another aspect, too, that family ties into it, and enjoyed my time there, but happy to be back here in East Texas again. That'll be another episode. We're continuing on here about how to elevate your broadcast this morning on Coffee with Karl and Rob, the sixth one. We're through 5. No, let's go 5. We're not through 6. We're through 4. Here's our 5th one. It's effective pacing and timing. Friends, you really have to balance the delivery of information, your analysis, if you have an analyst that's helping, and just those antidotes to maintain a steady, engaging pace throughout the broadcast. I think it's important to know when to be energetic, and knowing when to slow down is crucial as well. I'll go back to something that your dad taught me a couple of years ago. I'm pretty high energy on my broadcast, and it was an 0-2 strike on the second pitch, and I was getting, here's the second strike. Know when to pace that. You don't get excited on the second strike unless it's something miraculous. You get excited on that third strike when it draws an out, and even then, you don't want to amp it up too much unless it's a very critical part of the game, such as baseball.
This ties back to one of our earlier tips of develop your own style, right? Because your timing and your pacing are all part of your style. I would always say, if you can, stay in an active voice, not a passive voice. So he plays the ball in left field versus he played the ball in left field. Just sort of always stay active. That's one of the main things, so you can stay on top of the play. But then, this is probably a little bonus tip here. Start singing in your car. If you like rapping, I think rapping's probably the best, but getting your tongue speed up. So that's sort of the main thing, is if you can get a faster tongue speed, then you can slow it down, and that's why I say sing in your car, because it's sort of the best way to not only project your voice, but also sort of get your inflection down, and then also sort of your pacing. So, this is part of your skill set. So your timing and your pacing, that's just something that you're going to develop along with your style, but it is very important to mention as sort of a subtopic to that, where you're saying, hey, this is a fast-paced basketball team, so you thus need to be on top of it, fast-paced basketball style, and then, you move over to maybe doing let's go ahead and say, if you're talking about doing some baseball, for example, you're not going to be talking as fast as you are with basketball. And then throw softball in the mix. That's going to be somewhere in the middle ground, because softball is much more fast-paced than baseball, but it's not necessarily as up and down as softball. In basketball. So you're going to have to get everything down correctly in terms of the pacing for your sport, your own personal style, and a lot plays into timing and pacing, but yeah, you want to be on top of it as much as you can, because it's not great if the crowd's going crazy and you're trying to find the words to describe what just happened, and then the moment's over and now you're playing catch up, right? So it's possible, but at the same time, I would go ahead and say, just as much as you can, keep up to the pace of the game, and don't think that you set the tone of the pace. The pace is set by the game, and then you try and stay in an active voice as much as you can. And then, yeah, going back to what you were saying about just the energy levels, yeah, read the room. Like, really, it's that strike two isn't a big deal. I get that if, it might have been a big deal in the time where it's like they're a strike away from the World Series, and then the next pitch is a home run, and then all of a sudden it's the opposite direction. And that's when you really need to get excited. Or let's just go ahead and say the next pitch is ball way outside. Like that sort of kills all your momentum. And then it's like, okay, now the 1-2 strike pitch. Oh, that's a high ball, and now it's 2 balls and a strike. It's like, oh man, I got excited on strike 2. He might walk this guy now. So you just gotta also hedge your bets by reading the room, knowing when it's appropriate. Now, if he strikes him out, yes, go crazy if it's a big strikeout. But also be careful not to go too crazy, because the game's not over, all those fun things, unless the game's over, So, again, just figuring out the situation that is best appropriate, timing, pacing. Let's go ahead and add in energy level to that, because it all goes into developing your own style, like we kind of talked about. So this is like sort of a subcategory tip, but we do need to expand on this one a little bit. And again, just it comes down to practice. I think that might be somewhere in here that we'll tie back in. Your first baseball game is not going to be anywhere near as good as your 5th, your 10th, your 100th. So yeah. You'll figure it all out as you get better in doing it. But timing and pacing do play into it. So active voice is part of the timing, so you're on top of it, and pacing is sport and game specific.
Yeah, 100%. Good stuff, Karl, and something to piggyback on that, too, as far as the energy on this 5th point is, also if your team is just getting slaughtered out there, you still need to have energy. I've listened to so many games, and to me it comes across as extremely unprofessional. It's okay to be a fan as a broadcaster, but you also have to, again, read the room, understand your demographic, and understand the position that you're in. You do need to act professional. And I've listened to broadcasts where a team is, they've won 20 games, and all of a sudden now they're on a 2-game losing streak, and every broadcast it's almost like, oh, here we go again. We're down by 20. No, you need to keep that same level of energy whenever you're winning those 20 games in correspondence to when you're losing, because people pick up on that. And don't get too excited. When your team wins, that's great. One of the things that I learned in Fargo, coming into Fargo when I was there at NDSU for that year was, hey, man, tone it down on the screaming. And I learned that. And so you really need to think about those things. We're talking about how to elevate your broadcast again this morning. Coffee with Rob and Karl. We've went coffee with Karl and Rob, because I like the K's together, C and the K, not Rob and Karl, Karl and Rob. We've went through 5 already. Know your audience, research and prep, develop a unique style, master the art of storytelling. We just talked about effective pacing and timing, also energy playing into that. Our 6 of 10 of how to elevate your broadcast is improve your vocal techniques. That's our 6th point. Work on your pitch, your tone, your enunciation to ensure your voice is clear, it's engaging, and it's easy to understand. This can make a significant difference in the overall quality of your broadcast. That's one thing that I've really worked on over the years, Karl, is making sure that I'm enunciating words to where people can understand them. Something that is very, very important, and also knowing that I don't have to fake my voice. I'm going to talk to you in person the same way that I'm going to be on the radio.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that it always surprises me. I won't name names, but there are certain broadcasters that I meet in real life off of the mic, and it really throws me off that their voice is not their broadcast voice. They, add a little deep in volume, and I'm just sort of like, okay, well, that works for you, that's fine. And really, I'm not knocking that at all. You find your own voice for your broadcaster voice, and I certainly don't sound the same 100% of the time when I'm not doing a broadcast. But I do think that there is something that goes into the effect of not trying to fake your voice so much that all of a sudden if your real voice cracks out, it sounds bad because you want to kind of maintain that character, if you will. Throughout the course of a movie, if someone who doesn't have a Southern accent has a Southern accent in the movie, and all of a sudden you hear that they actually have an English accent, it'll throw you off. So that's just sort of the one thing I would say about changing your voice. You don't want to go so far away from your natural voice that you potentially could have cracks in your broadcast. But the enunciation, yeah, that's important, especially when we're coming to names. It's hard to explain, but for example, there's a team in the G League that's from Mexico City, and I forget his first name, but there's a player named Andreassi, right? And if you're just gonna Americanize that, it's Andreassi, no, it's Andreassi. Yeah. So you got to make efforts to sort of have sounds that aren't necessarily as naturally sounding in your own language. The head coach for the Austin Spurs is Petar Bojic. He's from Serbia. So you got to work with some of these names that aren't necessarily natural to you and still correctly say them. So if you know that a word's going to come up or a name's going to come up that's maybe not necessarily something you're accustomed to saying, practice it. And then, I do want to reiterate something that I did, especially younger in my career, was I would just sing and rap along in the car. And, that helps with your breathing. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the moment that we forget to breathe. So, you have to try and get better at naturally inhaling while you have a slight pause in your voice, because any little pause is probably to prepare oxygen for the next expelling of air. So, there's a lot that goes into your general vocal technique that's not just your actual mouth making sounds. Sometimes you just have to, like I did just there, have a little between voice. And now that I pointed out, it's going to annoy you also. I'm sorry about that. You might start hearing it, but we have to breathe. We have to take in air, because next thing you know, I think Craig Way, I love Craig, and he's gotten better about it, but I think he used to get so excited that he'd forget to breathe. So by the end of a call, you could tell that he needed to take a big, before he touchdown Texas, it's like just because he would call like a 60-yard run, and then after he gets into the end zone, he needed a big sigh of air for the big exclamation point at the end. And that's fine, that you need it. We aren't robots that are just constantly spitting out vocal tracks. And, hopefully we are never replaced by AI in the sports broadcasting field. When the Masters rolled out the AI, I was like, okay, this is getting scary, because I might have to learn how to do something else because it wasn't good, but that's only going to get better. But, going back to it, we're not robots. So, learn how to work with your own lung capacity and your own tongue speed, because I'm sort of blessed in a way. I'm a Southerner raised by Yankees. So the Southerners tell me I speak fast, and the Yankees tell me I speak slow. So I'm doing something right, I think.
You are. Yeah, well, again, thanks for joining us here. Rob Hipp here, our Director of Operations, talking with Karl, Director of Broadcasting, as we're telling you today how to improve your sports broadcasting. Really wanting to help you make those your broadcast engaging, elevating your broadcast. We've went through 6. The 7th one that I think is so important is just really learning to build chemistry with your co-host or your analyst, if you will, however you want to look at that. But you really need to develop rapport and camaraderie with your fellow commentators. I think when you engage in natural, unforced conversations, it creates a more enjoyable and relatable experience for your listeners and viewers. I go back to when I first started at Sam Houston State many years ago, and my analysts love him to death. We're best friends now. We still talk. Let's be honest, he's one of the reasons I came back to Huntsville, and I hope one day I'm privileged to work alongside him again, because we really had so much fun. He became one of my best friends, kind of my circle of 5 that I talk about sometimes. And Karl, of course, you're in that circle, but it's really important to have those core group of people. And you and I have good chemistry. Brian Adams and I have good chemistry. Phil Hansen in Fargo, when I had the privilege to work with him, had great chemistry. You really need to build friendships with the people that you work around. I'm not saying you have to get on the phone and call them every single day, but I will step out and say, for me, it's important for me to build friendships with the people that I work alongside, because it's not just in that broadcast booth where I want to help them in life. I want to help them outside of that booth as well. That all resonates when we do get into the booth, Karl.
Yeah, and I think this relationship starts off the air, obviously. It's one of those things where you have to like this person before you get on a mic together. And even if you only have 20 minutes to get to know someone, it's your first time working with them, just, hey, ask them their background in the sport. Ask them how they like to do their broadcasting, and let them know when you might talk. Set up some kind of system. If we're talking about immediate on air, this is again before you're on air. Say, if you're comfortable with it, set up the touch system, set up the point system where it's like, and that is first down for the Roadrunners. And then that cue is for the color analysts to start talking, right? So this way they know you're done with your thoughts, so they can pick up on your cadences. And, that's very important for color and play-by-play broadcasters. But let's even take it further than just on-air play-by-play and color work, studio work as well. I think at first you need to have some kind of like head nod cue, things like that, so you're not talking over each other. That's the worst sounding thing in sports broadcasting, no matter what level, is people talking over each other where they're trying to get the same points across at the same time, and then nobody gets their point across. So have little cues if you're just working out with somebody, and then over the course of the season, you'll find that just gets better. And then, sometimes you just don't like the guy you're working with. That'll happen, but fake it if you can, because it's so funny. Milo Hamilton, the legendary Astros broadcaster, rest in peace. Harry Carey, legendary Cubs broadcaster, rest in peace. I think they both met up in St. Louis doing the Cardinals together, and they hated each other. But then they had to be on air with each other 3 hours to plus a day, for an entire 162 game season. But, I think that probably was very easily told on air, and it makes the broadcast nowhere near as fun as if you're having two guys who thoroughly enjoy each other, and baseball's an extreme example, obviously, but, if you're someone who likes to hog the mic, take that criticism well that somebody wants to talk, don't tell them you talk enough or anything like that, there's ways to go about it that'll, lead to chemistry that does bleed on air joy. So, just I would say go ahead and, get to know them first, and then set up some basic, hey, this is the first couple times we're working together, let's do this, and, this means don't talk real quick, or this means wrap up your thought, whatever cues you guys need, because the play-by-play guy needs the mic to describe the action as it's happening. That's the most important thing. Don't steal an entire play if you're a color analyst. So that's where that chemistry really plays in, is also knowing the basic fundamentals of the sport and play-by-play. And we'll have other episodes on that, sort of like how to be a play-by-play and color analyst in X sport. And, where you need to know the differences. Like TV, you can talk over the play. Radio, you can't. So, those are things that you need to discuss with your co-host, your commentary, that's your co-commentary for live events, and figure out the best way to make a broadcast work. And that chemistry will come on its own. Hopefully, hopefully you don't start to resent each other either, because, I'll have to say there have been people that I didn't enjoy working with, and it was like, using my professionalism to keep it professional.
Absolutely. We're talking again about how to elevate your broadcast, as now we'll move into number 8 of 10. And I think another important one here is just to stay adaptable and versatile with how you broadcast. And what I mean by that is you really have to be prepared for unexpected situations and be willing to adapt to your commentary style. Let me rephrase this. You need to adapt your commentary style or content as needed, whether it's a last-minute lineup change or a surprising turn of events. You really need to be able to adjust on the fly. You never know what's going to happen. Perfect example, I'm calling the FCS National Championship, Carl, for Sam Houston State. By the way, we won. We defeated South Dakota State in that COVID year. But we had to adapt on the fly. Why? Because a thunderstorm rolled through in the middle, and we went on a delay, and we still had to fill airtime and stream time. How did we do that? Well, we already had the press conference leading up to that game in queue, so we were able to go back and replay some of the press conference of Coach Keeler talking, Eric Schmidt, the quarterback, and some of the players. We really made that an enjoyable experience when otherwise it could have just easily went back to music. We wanted folks to stay engaged with the most important game of the season. And then also, thanks to our friends at Malakoff, I learned from them, we were live streaming also with visual elements on the internet during that game. I threw up a radar on there so people could see the weather and how it was tracking. So really make sure that you're adaptable and versatile when you're broadcasting.
Yeah, because we call it tap dancing, at least my dad and I do, where it's like, oh, I'm going to be tap dancing because sometimes in the NBA during the playoffs, a game, you'll see it right now if you really start to notice, a game's really scheduled for, 7:02 tip-off, but it's publicly said 7 o'clock, and those 2 minutes is like for the national anthem starting lineups or whatever, but then the game before it will go long, so there's something like called a 7-minute slide, and there's 2 7-minute slides where a game could last as long as 15 minutes past its scheduled tip-off. So all of a sudden, maybe you're all thinking, oh, hey, we're about to get ready, and no, we're not. Okay, you might have a heads up, you might not. Like you said, we can't really control weather, so that could be a definite deciding factor of you have an extended pregame show. And that's where you can really start to sound boring, where you're just like, well, Rob, UTSA is about to get rolling here against North Dakota State. You seen any good movies lately? Like at some point you might have to just go ahead and make light of the situation like that. But at the same time, you guys, that's a blessing right there that y'all had those that audio ready to go in the can, because that's engaging and that's something that's relevant to the topic. And if all of a sudden you and I start talking about the newest Netflix series, people will be like, isn't the national championship game supposed to be going on? They're just tuning in, and then it takes you 5 minutes to get off Netflix and be like, oh, hey, by the way, this is the Sam Houston State broadcast. You got to try your best to keep it relevant. But yeah, being adaptable and versatile, and I'll take that one step further outside of just an individual broadcast. I've been successful in moving my way up the broadcasting ladder because I didn't say no to sports that I didn't know anything about. Mm-hmm. I love doing soccer. I love doing volleyball, and I've done Big 12 swimming and diving championship for goodness sake. And someone asked me, Karl, what's your background in swimming and diving, if you don't mind me asking? It's like, I've been in a pool before. I know
a great an Olympic analyst. That's how I'm going to get this one going.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate to know Jimmy Fegan, who was a gold medalist, and he basically did color with me. And it comes down to confidence there too. So versatility, confidence, learning the sport. We'll talk about that in a minute, I'm sure, but it's one of those things where I would say go out there, and if someone says, hey, would you like to do rugby? And you say, I've never done rugby, is that okay? And they say, yes, we need a play-by-play broadcaster. Go study up on rugby. I work with Flow Sports sometimes, and they actually asked me, hey, would you be able to do a gymnastics competition? And I said, when? And they're like, tomorrow. And I'm like, no. You give me a week to study up gymnastics, I would probably be able to, confidently speak my way through it. Give me a run of show and all those good things, the prep work we were talking about. But no, never calling gymnastics before. Then you asked me the day before because I think they had somebody drop out. I'm just sort of like, I don't want to embarrass myself, nor your broadcast, So I would say be adaptable in the sense of know where you're at, and be versatile in the sense of do as many things as you can, because if you can do play-by-play for any number of sports, it's just going to help you even more in other sports. Like I would say that my basketball helps me with my baseball and vice versa. So, the more you do, the better you get at this.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier, when you do have those unfortunate, unforeseen breaks, that's where preparation comes into key, because you can never be over-prepared for a broadcast, especially a sports broadcast. We're continuing here on how to elevate your broadcast. 2 more to go. Thanks for staying with us. A little extended time here today on Coffee with Karl and Rob. The 9th one is really engage with your audience. Foster a sense of community. You can interact with your viewers and listeners on social media or through the broadcast itself, responding to questions, sharing opinions, and creating opportunities for dialogue. One thing when I came to Sam Houston State is I had the Bearcat fan text line. It was a Google Voice number, but it gave an opportunity for me to interact with our audience. I would say, hey, if you're out there listening, we'd love to hear from you. It's like Christmas every time we get a text message, and we like to showcase our listeners out there in Bearcat country. Send us a text message, and we'll get to those as this game goes on, and people would. they would flood my phone sometimes. That's why I had the Google Voice number. I didn't want to give out my personal cell so I could turn it off whenever I wanted. But it was a way to engage. Not everybody wants to do that, but you can. And I think that's a really good way just to make people feel like, hey, we're part of this broadcast. We're part of something special. It really does make it unique, and it's a way to engage with your audience.
I think that works really well on the smaller audience broadcasts, and I don't mean that Sam Houston State was small in that sense, so don't take that the wrong way if anybody's watching from Sam Houston, but you certainly can't pull that off on an NBA broadcast, for example, or, there's anything that's going over regional sports. But, yes, I do think that that's a nice little way to help, connect with your audience at the lower levels, if you will. Like, I think if you really have time, I don't. I'm terrible looking at my phone unless I know I need to for the broadcast, because I tend to put that out of sight, out of mind. I have my watch to tell me my time, and my phone is really only there for the absolute emergencies when it comes to that. So I try to not be distracted from the game, but some people like you can do that, Rob, and I think that's good. My engagement tends to be after the broadcast. Like, I'll post an interview I do with the coach. I'll cut up some highlights. Those are also things that fans enjoy seeing, and I think that those are things that I make work for me, because I'm somebody who enjoys the post-production on the social media side of things. So I made sure that I could go ahead and get my post-game interviews with Pat Hallmark, our head coach over at UTSA, and Derek Pittman. The Pat Hallmark's the baseball head coach. Derek Pittman's the soccer head coach. Anybody that'll do a post-game interview with me that I can post on socials later, yes, that I think that's also a good way to get out there and, basically still tell the story of these teams. But, I'm not, I just don't have the capacity to answer text messages or emails on air, because I certainly fill enough time, because I don't really shut up already.
Yeah, well, and it goes on to just being unique and what makes you uniquely you. For me, that's the way that I engage, but there's numerous other ways that you can engage. So really important, though, to make your audience feel connected to your broadcast. Doesn't mean you have to interact with them directly, but just let them know, hey, like your dad, always on his broadcast, a pleasant good evening, folks, and thanks for tuning in. That right there is a sense of community. It makes you feel special that your broadcaster has reached out to you and said, hey, a pleasant good evening. I think that's important. As we continue on here, elevating your broadcast, last but certainly not least, something that is very important and maybe one of the most important things is always be learning and improving. You want to always strive to grow and evolve as a broadcaster. I think seeking feedback from peers and other mentors helps you with that, to stay updated with industry trends. You never want to stop honing in those skills. I think the pursuit of excellence will set you apart in the world of sports broadcasting. There's nothing wrong with that. You need to be excellent on your broadcast. Doesn't mean you need to be perfect, but you need to be excellent. And how do you do that? You engage with others. You continuously learn from them. When you engage with them, ask questions. Hey, this was my first basketball game. Where did I fall short? What can I do better? Study the game. Study the dimensions of the court. Those kind of things will help you to get better and strive for excellence. I always say this, Karl, and I love it. Maybe I heard it from you. I don't know who I heard it from, but I'm stealing it and I'm using it every day. My best broadcast is my next broadcast.
I don't think I've ever said that, because I know that I've had some good broadcasts that I don't want to say, I'm going to be better next time, But, I do think that that's been an underlying theme throughout this entire episode. And, it's fitting that we still wrap up on it as number 10, because I know that I can continue to improve. You and I were in the game for about a decade back in 2019 when we did the NCAA Division II tournament for basketball over there at St. Ed's. We not only did the production side of it, but we also did the play-by-play side of it. And I listened back to it. I'm not saying I was bad back then, but I can tell you that I improved. And, I'm not going to name names, but I have come across a few people that already think that they're ready for the NBA or something like that in their 10th game. And, it's just like, take criticism well and, learn from people who will give you that honest feedback. And, even if you disagree with it, at least be open to hearing it. I just got some feedback the other day that really kind of annoyed me, and I won't really say it so this person doesn't know, but it was one of those things where they thought that we go back to enunciating. They thought that I was enunciating the names a little too non-American, So I'm like, no, if they are Serbian, I'm going to say their name with a Serbian enunciation. That's just part of being a linguist in this broadcast and industry. And I guess I gave away the hint of what it was. But anyway, when it comes down to it, yeah, be willing to receive feedback, because I think I did I again won't name names, but this is years ago now. I did a whole long thing to the color analyst and the play-by-play broadcaster, and the color analyst immediately was like, great feedback. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And the play-by-play broadcaster got mad at me. He was just like, I wasn't saying you were bad. I'm just saying these are things you can continue to work on in your he was in his first 25 games, and he literally told me, he's like, I don't think that I can improve. And it's like, okay, if that's really how you feel, I'm not going to tell you otherwise. But, that pretty much ended me giving him any good feedback. And, just be open to the feedback and know that you will continuously improve. Because what is that now? 4 years ago? Yeah, I'm happy to say that I am much better, in my own opinion, than I was 4 years ago at basketball play-by-play. That's just part of the journey. Keep improving. Don't think that you're ever going to be as good as you're going to be. So, maybe that's sort of what I would like to say, Rob. Maybe not my next broadcast is my best broadcast or whatever, but don't think that you're ever going to be as good as you're going to be. Just keep trying to get better. And it goes back to every tip that we told you 1 through 9, So take everything to heart, and, just know that even if you're 20 years into it, you could still be better next week.
Yeah, I think it's all good points. And one thing that I wanted to end on, too, is in this industry, sometimes it's great to be confident. You need to be confident in this industry, but you also don't need to be arrogant. There is a line between confidence and arrogance, and people can pick up on that every single day of the week. I've talked to numerous broadcasters, a lot of young aspiring broadcasters that, they're like, yeah, I've been doing that, and I know I've got what it takes to get to the next level. I've been doing it. And I pick up on words when I hear people say I, or me. To me, that comes across as not confident, but almost like, hey, I know that I'm good enough for this. And that's the wrong attitude to have. You need to be confident, but you also need to realize that you can get better. Situations, too, where I've came across mentors in the industry that are well known that have had jobs that have opened up. And I've referred some of these jobs to some people, and they never even said thank you. And that kind of stuff, you need to be very, very, very humble in this industry, because you never know where that next road is going to take you. So don't not be confident. You need to be confident, but also it's not about you when you broadcast games or your talent or your ability. It's about the student athletes or the subject that you are covering. That's kind of how I wanted to end my little thought on this today, Karl. Been a lot of fun here on ways to elevate your broadcast here. Coffee with Karl and Rob.
Yeah, it's never about you. That is the main thing about sports broadcasting. I sometimes don't even give out my name because it's about the people down there. And, sometimes I'll be honest with you, I've had broadcasts where I couldn't prepare. So I'd rather not tell people that my name is Karl and, this team did not actually give me any information. So it might not be the best product now. But, really, you still do your best no matter what the situation is. And, you take it with a smile. And then, like you say, just try your best to be over yourself. Don't think that you're the best thing and people are listening for you, because they're not, and you're not. I think you said this in one of our other episodes. Vin Scully was the best ever, and I think there's a few other people that probably are up there in the conversation. Just try to be the best version of yourself, and have fun with it again. I talked about that earlier. This is a fun industry. If you're in this for the money, well, I have to tell you something. But, you're in it because it's a fun thing to do. It's a nice little hobby on the side. Yeah, you might get a little bit of side cash out of this, but really, this is sports broadcasting. It's a fun industry, and you hope that it's maybe something you do for a lifetime or you continue for the rest of your life. But, again, if you're not having fun with it, why are you in it? So, and then also just don't be so arrogant that you kind of have a attitude that people don't really like because you rub them the wrong way. Yeah. So there are things that go into, that. We'll talk about those another time. But, yeah, I appreciate you writing up these tips, Rob. And then, I think I can't wait for the next episodes. We'll keep this rolling, and it's fun having coffee with you every morning.
Yeah, man. And
Not every morning, but yeah.
I actually am starting to have coffee now. And I will say this name because I do want to highlight this young man before we go. You talk about somebody who is very humble in this industry, that has worked very, very hard, that has remained open to criticism across the board. He has never said, no, I don't think so. I don't know where you got that from. He always says thank you and has an attitude of gratitude. And it's circled back from East Texas to Northeast Texas all the way to Fargo. Our good friend B.J. Walters, who has been a tremendous young man and has grown in this industry. And when I got to Fargo, had no idea that B.J. was up there. And I actually was not able to broadcast 2 basketball games because of NDSU being in the FCS National Championship in Frisco. And B.J. Walters was there in Fargo. We did have, and I told him, I said, look, you weren't the first choice. And you got to be honest because people will know. But the other guy that normally had filled in was not available, but B.J. was the guy that came to mind second. And I called him and I said, I think you're ready for this. And he got that opportunity, not just because the other guy that we normally have was there. There was 15 other guys we could have chose. He got that second chance because he was always so humble, and he did a great job. So that's what it is in this industry. Take care of people, be good to people, and you'll go far if you have that attitude.
Yeah, and that's a good closing note, really, Rob. I think that's BJ. We're going on knowing him over a decade, right? So I would just say, be like BJ. Just be somebody who's happy.
We're gonna wear shirts.
Yeah, right. Be happy, be humble, be ready for your opportunity, and don't think that you're doing something wrong if it takes 20 years to get there, right? I mean, I don't know how long BJ had been doing it, but you and I have definitely known him for over a decade, and that was so big to him that he got to do those North Dakota State games. I didn't get to tune in, but I do know that he was super excited. I saw him on the social medias, and, that's something that it is a big deal to people doing any Division I game, much less your first one, and, I think that the reason that he got that over somebody who was comparative in talent and experience is because he's a good person and people like working with him. So, that'll go further than talent sometimes. So, just to kind of wrap it all up on how to improve as a broadcaster, make sure that, you're self-aware of your own communication, because I've known some good broadcasters that have grinded other people's gears, to put it in term, and they do not get opportunities because of that. So, just always be somebody who's really ready to improve your broadcasting, even past this nice hour-long podcast we recorded for you.
Just remember, be like BJ. Karl, been a fun one today. I want to remind you, if you're out there live or if you're going back and watching this at a later date, make sure you join the SHN Sports Association. It's very affordable, $20 a month. It's not a long contract. You can cancel if you want to, but I don't think you will, because we're providing content, not only such as this is kind of our free content, but we do provide in-depth content on sales training, different techniques that you can use in the industry, equipment, and much more. So make sure you join the association and interact with the community. That's what it's all about. We want to help you elevate your broadcast each and every time you get on the air. Karl, thank you. Been a lot of fun. Can't wait until the next one. And we will see all of you around on the SHN Sports Association. Have a great day, Karl. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks, Rob. Thank you for having me, as always. And hey, let's just keep on pumping these out. I hope a lot of people like this.
We'll see you next time.